going on, guys? Thanks for joining us here at Brothers of Merit. This is Brandon, the host and one of the founders of the show, joined by Taylor as usual. Taylor, what's up, brother?
What's up, brother? How's everybody doing?
Doing good, man. A little sick. I apologize from the get-go that I'm not sounding too hot. A little of a throat issue, but we're all good. So if you guys hear me sound a little weird, just apologize in advance.
The interview, he wasn't sick, so it'll get better in about 2 minutes.
Yeah, it will. You're exactly right.
Yeah, so everybody, we just wanted to say thank you from the get-go. We're going to start every episode with thank you because we know that any success that we see from here, first off, comes from God, and any blessings that he's deciding to give to this is just his plan. We're just along for the ride. And then you guys listening to this and sharing this and continuing coming back. So we thank you. We appreciate you. And so as we said last episode, rating and reviewing us on iTunes is huge for us. So we definitely appreciate that. We just wanted to call out some people that have done so. Lil Zarban, thank you very much. CMC Greg, thank you very much. And our boy, Mike Hadi, thank you for the rate and review. We do appreciate it.
Yep, and you guys know him from episode 4, the Channeling Emotions, which I thought was a pretty good episode. So
yeah, absolutely. And you guys can feel free to check that one out if you haven't already. There's a lot of really, really good stuff in there.
Absolutely. And speaking of really good stuff, we got some stickers in here at Brothers of Merit. We were really excited about these stickers, and they're free. You know, we're not asking you guys to buy them. We just want to give them out to you guys. And all we ask you to do is share them with another brother. So if you go into our Instagram, you can check it out, and it tells you what you need to do to get them, and we'll send them to you right away. So, all right. So to get into what we're talking about today, we interviewed Dr. Randy Hemphill. He is from Birmingham, Alabama. He's been in Life Ministries, is his ministry with his wife Melody for many years now. And he's all about restoring the heart of a man. And The Restored Man is what his book is called. And speaking of the book, Taylor, you want to tell them about the giveaway that we have?
Yeah, absolutely. So Dr. Randy Hemphill was kind enough to give us 2 signed copies of his book, The Restored Man. So we're going to be doing a giveaway to give those out. As you're going to hear in the episode, there is a ton of awesome content. If you follow him on social media, that he has just an awesome image of an old car, an old just like vintage rustic car that gets restored to the beauty, the new creation, which is what God does in us. And that's what the book's about. And it's awesome. So like I said, we're going to be giving those away. The way that you're going to be able to enter that giveaway is if you rate and review us on iTunes and then shoot us a DM on Instagram with your iTunes name so we can verify that that's you. That's going to be all you need to do to enter that giveaway. And then by next episode, we will announce the winner of the 2 books and we will send those out.
Yep. And you guys aren't going to miss it. It was a great read. Awesome guy. And he goes over, he climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, which is the tallest freestanding mountain in the world, and what it was like to achieve that. And then he goes over the 4 phases of restoring the heart through God, so of a man. So it was a great book. Check all that out, and we'll get to the interview and let you guys hear it.
See you on the other side.
All right. Alrighty. Hey, Randy, how you doing?
Brandon, good to see you. Or talk to you today. Hope you're well, brother.
Yes, sir. Same to you. First off, I appreciate you coming on to our show and giving out back to the brothers who are listening to this and the people that are, reading your book, what you have in store for men with your book, The Restored Man, and why you're so passionate about it. So super appreciative of your time. I know it's valuable. So,
well, you got it, brother. And hey, Brothers of Merit, as soon as I saw what you guys are about and, both fighting for men's hearts, but also this whole brotherhood piece. I mean, I was fired up to get on here with you and just encourage some guys out there and be a part of what Brothers of Merit is all about.
We really appreciate that. And I believe the reason why we both align in the goal is because you're so passionate about, one, your ministry, but also, fighting for men's hearts, which if you guys read the book, you'll definitely understand that. I'm currently reading it now and I'm loving every minute of it. So Randy, if you could just, tell us a little bit about your background, yourself, your ministry, you're down in Alabama. Let's let the guys know who you are.
Well, guys, it's great to be on here with you. And it's hard to put story in short form, but I guess I would say, I'm a recovering religious dude, a recovering Pharisee. I grew up in the church. My dad was a pastor. And, I think in my younger years, it wasn't all a bad foundation. I mean, I loved the churches we grew up in, moved around a good bit. but I mean, I came to Christ at an early age, but got this real faulty kind of distorted image of God growing up. I kind of like to call it the God with the big stick. It was this angry God who was trying to keep all of us crazy humans in line. And I really, Brandon, I kind of carried that for a lot of years, adapted it a bit. But there was just this real unhealthy image of God. And I think it was in my adult years when both I went through some brokenness, Melody and I went through that, some brokenness in our marriage, that whole system collapsed and God began to do, particularly the last 15 years, some rebuilding of who I am as a man, restoring his image, restoring my heart. And so, I'm thankful for how I grew up. God used that as part of my story, but there was a lot of work God had to do to get me back to a healthy foundation, I guess you could say. So all that led to, Brandon, about 10, 11 years ago, we started up Life Ministries. And I'll get to that a little bit later, but that came out of some real healing and restoration God did in our marriage and led to the launch of Life Ministries, where we're just trying to fight for the hearts of men and women and couples and hopefully make the church healthier. That's part of the vision. So it's been a wild ride, and I'm just enjoying it.
And I'm sitting here and I'm looking at some of the things that you've accomplished, in your life. And obviously the ministry is huge. I mean, that's what you're all about, God and walking with him and, men's hearts. And your wife, Melody, I know she's probably into the same thing with women and just marriages together. But I sit here and I look at your list, and you climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, which is in, I believe, Africa.
Hey, dude, you get me talking about hiking or Kilimanjaro. That's we could do a whole podcast on that because I've always loved the outdoors. I'm not some kind of crazy, hiking dude, but I got to think about a bucket list, and I'm like, I want to climb one of the peaks of the world. And so got with some guys, and we decided we were going to climb Kili, which is the highest freestanding mountain in the world, 19,400 feet.
Jeez.
And it's the highest point in Africa. So a little over a year ago, we did some training and stuff, got over there and spent 8 days on the mountain. But on the sixth day, we got to the final base camp at 16,000 feet, left out at midnight. Now, hey, you want to talk about a crazy night, man? We left out at midnight at 16,000 feet, climbed all night, and summited at 7 a.m.
Wow.
And those 7 hours were probably the longest 7 of my life. I mean, it was cold. You're breathing like half oxygen, wind. I mean, we wanted to give up several points, but we just, you talk about brotherhood. That night formed a brotherhood. And man, when we rounded this final corner, and I could see there's a famous sign, at the top of Kilimanjaro. And when I saw that sign, I began to weep. I mean, I couldn't stop crying for an hour because the emotion of the training, the finally getting there, pressing through the night. I mean, man, that's kind of a spiritual picture, but it was a very emotional thing. One of those memories I'll hold on to forever.
Wow. I mean, I can only imagine, how high that is. That's, first of all, it's insane. And the training that you put into, and you said your brotherhood, how many other men did you have doing that with you?
Yeah, we had a group of 10 guys ranging from, we had a 14-year-old up to 65.
Wow.
And a couple of guys toward the end just couldn't quite do the summit, but 8 of us made it to the peak. And, it's just one of those kind of trips. We as guys, I think God has wired adventure into us. I mean, so many times I think religion and even in the church, we tend to kill a man's heart, kill desire. And part of this whole restoration process even is unleashing those desires God has put in us in a godly way. And for me, this whole trip was about doing it with some guys, taking in God's beauty. I mean, it was a gorgeous mountain and also being tested, being able to get to that peak and that summit. It was just a marker in my life. So cool trip. I would encourage, if you're a dude like me who's kind of middle-aged and, I couldn't do anything like an Everest, but Kilimanjaro was, it was just a fun experience.
Yeah. And also, if you are a thrill seeker, it seems to be, because man, that just thinking about it, I mean, it's definitely intriguing. It sounds amazing. And Taylor, the other co-host of this show, he is definitely into doing things physically active, and he is huge into putting a goal down on paper and getting it done. Like that is his. He did I think it was last year, he did a run. He ran for 24 hours straight, no sleep,
Oh,
and it was to
wow.
raise money for a ministry, I believe, for Young Life possibly. And 24 hours straight, no sleep. I think him and a buddy covered, I don't know if it was 70 to 80 miles, and you got a certain donation for every mile you did, but he's super into that. So when he hears this, I have a feeling I'm going to have some sort of documentation. I got a sign saying we're going to be doing this. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I swore when I got off the mountain, I'm like, man, I'll never do that again. I mean, it was the hardest night. But, now I'm kind of thinking about doing it again. Of course, my wife probably killed me, but it was, I'd love to even hit, there's a European summit, there's one in South America. So who knows? I'm just along for the ride, but love some great adventures. And I think guys do. We just, we love to be a part of something bigger than ourselves and to accomplish something. So it was just a great trip.
yeah, it sounds like it. And it's funny you say that, because God put all these things on this planet for us to, adventure into and find. You know what I mean? So as men, we seek and strive to find those places for us to just get into the dirt more and find out, what more we can find in this world. So
Yeah, definitely. And going back in my story, Brandon, it's, I mean, when I say that religion tends to kill a man's heart, I mean, religion in itself is not bad or evil. I mean, but it's just that over time we have sort of packaged Christianity in such a way that it's just about behaviors over the heart. It's about, making some points, changing a few, religious techniques. And I just think the gospel says that Jesus came to ransom our hearts. And when a man gets his heart back, and it's a process, I mean, that's what we lay out in the book. I just think a man comes alive and begins to get on this great adventure with God. And so, climbing mountains, getting restored in Christ, hey, it all to me paints a picture of what's available to us in this Christian life as men.
absolutely. And I mean, at that point, it seems to kind of give you, spiritual freedom. Once you accept God into your life and accept what he has given you and what he has in store for you, that it's kind of like a breath of fresh air, like some weight off your shoulders. Like this is what life should be.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Totally agree.
so and we sit here and talk about you climbing this mountain. So how did that, or did it inspire you to write your book, The Restored Man? Just give us some details on that. Like, what was your main inspiration for that?
I think the bulk of it was years of trying to figure a lot of things out myself as a man, trying the next Bible study, trying the next, men's discipleship program. And I was even on staff at churches. In fact, one church, I was kind of the men's marriage minister. And so I had all these experiences, a lot of years of counseling men. And I think during that time of climbing the mountain year and a half ago, there were these rumblings inside that were basically saying there has to be a better way. There has to be a way that works, that gives a man, not just tells us what we're not doing or that we're not measuring up, but it really answers the question of how. How do we as men grow both spiritually and emotionally? Brandon, I mean, for me with the ministry, do a lot of counseling, the last 10 or 12 years. And I continually have men, when we first meet, it could be an addiction issue, it could be a relationship struggle. And so there's the behavioral element. But once we really dig in, begin to work on his story, we see there's this kind of a rich well inside of his heart. And so the book was really written as a way to say, here's a process to work through where we're not getting on some religious assembly line, but we're getting into the garage of God's grace and we're letting him restore us personally. We're letting him father us, which is what Jesus came to do, restore us to the Father. And it kind of lays out a path for a man to follow. And so I think this has kind of been in me for years, and it was just great to finally get it down into book form and a process that I think will be helpful, hopefully, to a lot of guys out there.
Yeah, definitely. And I love what you said there that, it gets you into the garage of God's grace, and it takes you off the assembly line. Like it's not just a path that you have to take every day that is stoned into you. It's exploring what your heart is actually supposed to be as a man.
Yeah, and the thing is, the car image is interesting because some people have said with the book releasing, "Oh, Randy, you're a car enthusiast," and I mean, the truth is, man, I'm not. I mean, I love cars like the next guy, but I'm not some, car enthusiast. But as I got to thinking about this imagery of restoration, the whole concept of restoring an old car really hit me, and it was. It's kind of like you and I drive down the highway. Here where I'm at in Birmingham, Highway 280 is a big, busy highway. And, there's scores of cars, there's trucks and minivans and you name it. But, when you pull up to a stoplight and you look over and let's say, man, there's like a 57 Chevy or a 50s Corvette or maybe one of those 70s Broncos. I think those are cool. And if you see one that's been restored back to its original parts, I mean, it turns heads. And what caught me with that was I feel like this in the church, we've just put men into these systems and just kind of punch them through a discipleship program. But when you begin to be fathered by God in a restoration process, it is very unique, it is individual. And when that kind of man gets restored, it will turn heads. I've seen it before. And I think the world is longing to see authentic restoration. And, there may not be a ton of us out on the highway of life, but I just think when it happens, it will get the world's attention.
It's funny you mentioned the Bronco. My wife loves a Bronco, and she also loves the Jeep Wagoneer. So you pull up at a stoplight and you look left to right and see one of them. She's in love with that already. So
Yeah, and we recently did some teaching videos. If you go to therestoredman.com, there's some videos I did, short ones, but we did them in a friend of mine's garage. And the last video we did, kind of showing the finished work, it was a 54 Corvette.
wow.
And this thing was immaculate. I think it's worth like $250,000 or something. Black, red interior. And it was breathtaking. And I just think, what an image for, when you really meet a guy that's been broken down, dealt with his story, dealt with his struggles, and he's experiencing restoration. It is breathtaking. And once again, for me, just the goal of this crazy book, because I'm just a dude like everybody else, but the goal is just to help a few guys out there experience that kind of restoration. It should be breathtaking because that's what the gospel's supposed to be.
Yes, you're exactly right. And so when you mentioned the restoration process in your book, you talk about the 4 phases. Can you just tell the guys what those each 4 are and what they're about?
Yeah, in short form, the book starts with kind of a starting point. It helps us as men assess where we're at, both spiritually with God and in our relationships. And there's a self-assessment, and then there's one that a guy can, have his girlfriend take, a best friend. If you're married, your wife can take it, and it kind of gives you a baseline for where you at present tense. And so after you do that, which helps you see, where are you doing well, where are you struggling a bit, you then enter into the 4 phases. And so the 4 phases being know God as Father, knowing self, live in brokenness and humility, and then walk with God in the disciplines. Now let's take a second, Brandon. You and I talk through those 4 because you may have some thoughts too. But
Yeah, definitely.
know God as Father is that first foundational piece where we take a man into his story with his earthly dad. I just have found over the years there's no more important human relationship than a man's relationship with his dad. It is foundational. It forms how we view masculinity, ultimately how we view God. And it's like before you can take a man to exactly a biblical understanding of God, we've got to go into that relationship with our dads. And so know God as Father is helping a man answer some questions, go back, remember some things about his father, both, healthy and some unhealthy parts, and then begin to come back around to, okay, so who is God really? Maybe my lens is a little bit blurred or distorted. And so that is foundation. I've just found in walking with men, that relationship is a critical one in any man's life.
Yeah, definitely. I've seen that as well through the group that we have here of my close friends, that anything that you've done with your father, or anything that's been done to you by your father, it definitely puts, either a good or a bad sense of life and sense of manliness and manhood and masculinity into you, whether that be a good or a bad thing. It hurt you or help you.
Yeah, and you think about sons and daughters, the role of a dad is basically what we might call gender identity. When it comes to a daughter's looking to a dad to say, Dad, do you see me? Am I beautiful? Do you notice me? Do I have your eye? It's to bless that feminine heart. But when it comes to a man's journey as a son, I think that core thing we are longing for from our dads is validation. Am I a man? Dad, do you see me make that shot? Did you see the grade on my report card? And all of us have imperfect dads. I've got 4 kiddos. I'm imperfect. And so God has almost designed the story in such a way that dads we're going to miss the mark. And so instead of us kind of sidestepping that or living in denial, let's look at that honestly. Let's honor our fathers by being honest about it and breaking it down a bit. And I think the level to which a man is willing to be honest about that and even broken is going to bring some restoration. Last night I'm leading the Restored Man on Wednesday nights with some guys. And one guy last night, boy, this was insightful, Brandon. He said, man, he's like in his 40s. And he said, I struggle to emotionally connect with my wife. And he said, I'm realizing tonight my dad didn't emotionally connect with me. And he said, I've never even connected those two.
Until now.
And here he is in his 40s, probably been married 20 years. That's the power of this, that you can go through all the religious motions, do a lot of good stuff. But when you start digging into this restoration process, man, you're going to connect dots like crazy.
Man, that's insane that after all those years, this just came out.
Yeah. And instead of just behaviorally saying, hey, you need to communicate with your wife more. Well, sure. We all do, those of us married, but it's digging into the root system of why don't we? And most of the times, our emotional mapping, you could kind of call it, is very much based growing up on our relationships with our parents, but particularly our dads. It's just how we view masculinity and manhood is shaped by our earthly fathers. And so that first piece, know God as Father, it's foundational. It can be a little tough for some guys to dig into, whether you had a difficult, broken, abusive dad, or whether you had a really good dad and you struggle to find some of the unhealthy things. It's a tough part of the journey, but man, the payoff is huge.
Yeah. And then you said, the gentleman in your group that, didn't really understand and realize that and put the two together, that, struggling to emotionally connect with his wife was because he never emotionally connected with his father. That kind of comes down to, I guess, which would be one of the next phases, which would be knowing yourself.
Yeah. The next phase, knowing self, is where we continue the journey of doing a lot of introspection. And what we do in that phase is to dig into the life of King David. It's hard to find a character or example in Scripture that's written about more than King David. And so we dig into his life as a man and we parallel that with our lives as men. And so, you find in there questions about David's beginnings, the battles that he faced. How did David grieve? How do we as men grieve? Knowing David's sexual story. That is a tremendous part of our lives as men, is our sexuality. And, knowing self is basically saying this: if we are going to be men of God who are, which I know that's a little bit of a cliche, but men who are healthy and selfless, we are going to have to deal with self because that gets in the way. And so that second phase takes you back into your story, a lot of questions about growing up, how you dealt with your spiritual and emotional lives. And it is, once again, if we're in the garage, this is where we're tearing the engine apart. We got greasy hands, but boy, this is where we do some major heart work on a man.
Yeah, and it's funny you talk about greasy hands and all because I've seen throughout like your social media posts that you have actually brought in pieces of cars and stuff, for your book release and for your group, sessions on this and all. So
Yeah. Well, we did last Saturday, we did a big book launch at here. If you're ever in Birmingham, come to Barber Museum. I mean, the place is phenomenal. But even our centerpieces that night were a bunch of old car parts. And I love that because I just don't want the Christian life to look polished and clean and nice and tidy because it isn't.
yeah, it's definitely not.
It's messy. And when a man starts doing restoration work, it's going to be hard. He's going to fail. It's going to reveal some of our dark parts of our stories. But that to me is why Jesus came. He came to enter into our messiness. And that's where grace, I think, is found. And so, yeah, I kind of like that image because it matches my life and how broken and messy it is.
And we all have that. I mean, even though we're Christians, and, we look to God as our higher power, to somebody that may be listening to this that is not a Christian, just because we are doesn't mean our life is perfect. We all go through the same exact battles and struggles as the next man. It's still life.
Yeah, it's just the journey of a man,
Absolutely.
and we all share in that. And so, knowing self is that second phase that really takes you down deep into your story and journey. And I think, for instance, Brandon, pulling out that knowing your sexual story piece, it's important because I think about I've got 3 sons and a daughter, and my 2 older boys are 16 and 13. And we do what we call warrior talks. Try and do it once a month where we just kind of go to a restaurant or sit around a fire pit. And warrior talks are just times to get honest as guys. And it's time for me as a father to pour into them. But almost every warrior talk, at some phase, we talk about girls and sex. I mean, it's the nature of the world they're in. It's part of who we are as men. And I mean, what I find with my boys is by normalizing that, by talking about it, it helps them to not feel, ashamed of their sexuality. It helps them to process it a bit better and to not feel like even those desires, they're not bad. God gave them to us, but he reserved those for that special marriage relationship. But I just find with them openness, our warrior talks, it's one of the things I look forward to. And, that knowing self digs you down into those parts of your journey.
That's so cool. Warrior talks. I love the sound of that and what's behind that. Your boys hearing that is one thing, but to hear it from their father, to hear it from the mouth of you, I mean, that's powerful. And that is what ultimately starts to form that foundation, that we have been speaking of.
Yeah. And I know just a quick diversion there, but, the warrior talks are part of what I've tried to lay out with the boys as a kind of 2 to 3 year initiation process of warrior talks, some testing, some going camping, shooting some guns. I mean, just doing some guy stuff. And it was really cool, Brandon. Last April, my oldest turned 16, and he kind of completed a 3 year process. And so I gathered his friends and some other important people in his life, and we had a night, had a fire pit, and we blessed him. We affirmed him. And I presented him with a sword. I'm kind of one that likes swords. I've started collecting them, and basically declared him a man that night. Caleb Hemphill, April of last year, was declared a man, and it was just like a rite of passage. It was kind of saying, you've fought, you've battled. I'm proud of you. Now take this sword and live it out. And it's something missing in our culture. If you ask most men, when did you become a man? You're going to get 100 different answers. And I love that we have the ability, I think, with this relationship with God to create that rite of passage for a young man.
I think that's awesome, Randy. I'm looking forward to that because, my son, he's 4.5. So I obviously still have years to go, but I look at, I take all this in, all this advice and all these different things that men do. We have a son and a daughter, and I try to take notes every day that I can. The reason I read these books such as yours and,
Yeah,
others is that I want to be able to make and provide a foundation for my son that God wants, so.
it is. And as men, it's Brandon, I think we cannot lead our children or lead our families to a place we haven't been.
Absolutely.
And so this restoration is about a man getting his heart back first. And if that happens, he can shepherd those kids. He can help, partner up and lead some things with his wife. And it's just the role of a man. It's central. And so, anyway, I know we diverted a little bit there, but that's stuff I get fired up. That may be a whole nother book, is kind of raising up these boys, but that one will have to be down the road.
Well, I will be contacting you back about that book as well. That's definitely something we could all talk about and use advice on
Yeah.
every day because it's such an ongoing issue, you know.
Yeah, sure is.
Yeah, the next one, living in brokenness and humility.
So, yeah, phase 3, living in brokenness and humility. And I know brokenness is a little bit of a catchword right now. And by living in brokenness, I don't mean living in a way that you're defined by your past. Brokenness says it's this posture that we see in God's word, that God shows his power in broken and weak people's lives. It's all through scripture. And so to live in brokenness and humility, we explore some key biblical passages in there, but it's basically helping a man to look back on his story and his journey. And instead of being defined by our brokenness and our past, to be marked by it, to be able to be grounded as men. The word humility literally means to be grounded.
Yeah.
And so, as men, that kind of posture, I'm not talking about being a doormat. That's not humility. Or, being some kind of a dictator on the other side. It's a man who knows who he is. And it's that confidence of brokenness and humility that we really explore in that one. And some great stuff to kind of dig into in that chapter too. But that's phase 3, brokenness and humility.
Wow. And that's pretty powerful because a lot of times I feel like a man can pull himself down from his past. He'll allow something in his past to just completely lead and dictate where his current life goes, even though it's in the past. And I love what you said there is, being grounded, accepting your past, but also at the same time learning from it.
Yeah. I think a lot of times as men, we tend to want to discount what we've been through or dismiss it or say, well, it wasn't that bad, or, my dad did the best job he could. And those kind of things just don't really dig into our stories and help us embrace our brokenness. Once again, that phrase, we're only restored to the extent that we recognize our brokenness. And so as we go there, God gives us power and grace. I need a whole lot of grace because I'm a broken, jacked up dude.
Aren't we all?
But there's great power that comes in that. And once again, I think the world is longing for men who are authentically broken, authentically restored. And so that's what that third phase explores.
I love that. And I like what you said as well, dismissing the truth. For instance, my father, I love my father to death. He's my best friend. And for so long, I never wanted to really say anything about growing up. He was a firefighter and he did that his whole life. He taught it, he did it. So he was, not around as much as I'd like him to be because my mother died, young to breast cancer. So he had to work nonstop to provide. And that is one of the hardest things. I couldn't dismiss the truth. And as I've started my walk further with God, as I get older, I've realized the emotional part of me that was hurt by my father was him just not being there. But I can't fault him for that because why he wasn't there was for a good reason. It's just.
Yeah. Well, in our stories, we all have unfathered places in our hearts. And, even now as a dad, I realize that I've already prepaid for counseling for my kids. I just know I'm not doing it perfectly. And if we did fathering perfectly, our kids probably would not have a need for God. God has revealed his father. And so we're going to have hurts there. And I appreciate, Brandon, you even sharing a little bit of that in your story because, your dad, I'm sure, did the very best he could.
Yeah, he did.
But he's imperfect, and there's some wounds that you carry because of it. And why not explore that and get some healing?
You're exactly right. And you can just learn from it. And like I said, it was nothing he could do. He had to work hard, but getting ready to turn 28. And as a young father of a 4.5 and 2.5, I try to look at things that I went through and try to make the best of them. No one's situation is ideal. Mine wasn't. I lost my mother, but life goes on and God's still here with me.
That's right.
So yeah. And the last part is, walking with God in the disciplines.
So yeah, phase 4, I intentionally put this last because most of the time when we look at men's discipleship or our processes, we tend to begin with stuff like Bible study and prayer and, important parts of the Christian life. But I put it last because I think once a man has worked through his journey with his dad, his story, understood healthy brokenness, then we're able to come to the disciplines. And instead of viewing Bible study or prayer, or, I talk a little bit about spiritual warfare in there, instead of viewing those as things that we do or things we have to accomplish, which we as guys tend to do, I like to refer to the disciplines as avenues of fathering. When I read the Bible now, it's basically saying, God, father me. How are you going to speak to me as your son? There's a part in the chapter about confession, which is a big part of brotherhood. And the point is not confession. The point is not prayer. The point is being fathered by God and walking with him in these disciplines. And so, it kind of rounds out the restoration process by coming to those foundational disciplines that help us grow as men. And then when you take that whole process in, we're never fully restored. So, I'm working back through the book myself from my own heart, probably for I don't know how many times. And we just continually go deeper with this and deeper. Because we're both restored in Christ and being restored. And so I think those 4 phases at least give some guys an opportunity and a pathway toward growth and restoration.
Like I said, I'm in chapter 4. I think I'm almost finished 4, and I'm loving every minute of it. What I love about this book is it's interactive. It's not just a book that you read and you're done with it. You have an interactive part where you're answering questions and, you're given numbers and answers to add up. You really put some time into it. And I know any man that wants to read it could definitely get a lot out of it. So that basically leads me to the last portion, which is, what's your primary takeaway that you want for men as they read this book and they finish it? What do you want them to get out of it? What was your goal in mind when you wrote it?
Well, I certainly want, guys who are reading the book and maybe some brothers who are listening in right now to us. I'm not some expert. I'm not a dude that has all his junk together. I'm a man who's got plenty of scars and hurts and brokenness. And so, putting this book together was just a way for me to say, hey, here's a way that's really helped me grow as a man and has helped a lot of guys that I've been able to walk with. And so, I don't want them to take this as like the manual for manhood or anything like that. This is just kind of a process to work through. I think particularly if any guys listening who've kind of gone the religious route like me and, found that it's suffocated your heart, it just hasn't worked. No doubt, I think you'll get a lot from this because that's my story. And getting off that assembly line and really saying, all right, God, restore my heart, father me, grow me. This lays out a bit of a guide. And I do hope some guys will work through it individually. And then I hope some guys will get in some groups and at some coffee shops or in their homes and open up about this stuff, because I think it could lead to being true brothers. Maybe we call it brothers of merit. That's our hope here, man.
That's awesome. And that basically started to answer the last question I had for you. Is I try to get from every person we have on the show, like, what advice can you give the men listening about brotherhood and seeking that through Christ? Like, what's your input and advice on that?
Boy, you and I could do a whole podcast on that one, Brandon. I been around the block with a lot of men's groups, a lot of unhealthy elements. So I guess if I had to narrow down to one of those pieces of advice, it would be to build trust and really dig into the heart. Instead of hiding behind some program, or we can even hide behind our Bibles, when we get together.
Yeah.
With my boys, when I meet with my guys, we always do a check-in. And a check-in is basically saying, we're going to listen to each other. How's your heart? How are you doing? We're not here to fix each other, and do that typical masculine fixing thing. But, I would just say to build brotherhood, you've got to build trust and you've got to model that kind of, authentic heart level talk. And I find that happens good around a campfire or a coffee shop. And so a lot we could say there, but I guess that's one thing I would put out there is trust and heart level conversation.
Yeah. And in the back of your book, if any men are interested in that, you have check-ins written in the back of that as well. So it's definitely something that you have applied not just in your life, but in your book for other men to
Yeah.
benefit from. And I love that because it holds each person accountable. It holds you accountable as a man to the other brother that you call a brother. Accountability is huge, and that's why we're here. And I think a lot of times men are kind of, pushed away from that or scared from it because as a man, you're typically not by certain people. You're not supposed to want to talk about your emotions or talk about things. You're supposed to keep them in, bottle them up, and be a man about it. Whereas it's the complete opposite.
Yeah, and it's even been cool. And I know we're just about out of time, but I know with my boys, it's kind of been neat to see a check-in as a part of our language now. And they'll even say at times, "Hey, Dad, I kind of need a check-in." And they know what that means is that's a safe place to talk. You're not going to be judged or quote corrected. I mean, you're going to be listened to, put an arm around you as a brother. I think that's what we as guys need, Brandon. It's we need to know we're not alone because something in the masculine heart says, I've got to do this myself. And true brotherhood says you're not alone. Your struggles are my struggles. And let's lock arms and walk through this crazy life together. And man, I would love to see that happen more out there. And I love the heartbeat of Brothers of Merit because that's what you guys are all about. And I just love this whole concept, what you guys are doing.
Wow, we appreciate that, Randy, and I love what you said. Is your struggles are my struggles, and iron sharpens iron. So we really appreciate you, checking in with us, giving us your time, and really supporting what we're doing here. And we appreciate you coming on the show. Taylor, I know wishes he could be here, but he definitely wanted me to tell you thank you.
Hey, you got it. It's been a joy to talk with you today. And hey, any dudes out there listening, brothers, you're not alone. Thanks for tuning in, and pray that God will do some restoration work in your heart like he's done in Brandon's and in mine.
Yes, sir. Definitely, Randy. Well, again, we appreciate it, and I will talk to you soon.
You got it. Thanks, brother.
All right, guys. Well, there you have it. There's an interview with Dr. Randy Hemphill. Like I said at the beginning, it was an awesome interview. We loved having him. We loved talking to him, and we hope to keep in contact with him. Really down to earth, knowledgeable guy that just wants to restore the heart of men through Christ and spread the gospel. And Taylor, I'm sure you enjoyed it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I was bummed to not get to be a part of that. Obviously, sorry for not teeing that up at the beginning, but I definitely learned a lot from that, and I hope that you all did too. So we also just wanted to touch one more time here real quick on that giveaway that we have. So if anything in that interview struck you, which I'm sure it did, like we said at the beginning, we do have 2 signed copies of that book. So all you need to do is go onto iTunes, give us a rate and review, and then let us know on Instagram that you did that. And by next episode, we will announce the winners of the giveaway for one of those signed copies.
Yep. That's awesome. I hope you guys do, and I hope some of you guys win the book and get to read it like we did. It was great. All right, so that wraps up this week's episode. Next week, we interview Zach Maldonado. He's from Texas, and we wanted to talk about The Cross Work. That's a book that he wrote. So we'll see you guys next week, and I hope you tune back into us. So Taylor, I'll talk to you later, man.
Absolutely. See ya.
See ya.